So, welcome to today's webinar titled Accessibility for All, Creating Inclusive and Compliant Digital Experiences. Accessibility barriers can make it incredibly challenging for individuals with disabilities to manage their banking and investment accounts. And we're focusing on banking and finance today, as we have we're joined we're joined by Rob Savage from Aviva. But really, what we're talking about today speaks to all digital experiences. According to financial well-being reports, 24% of disabled individuals reported difficulties with online banking services. This rises to 58% among those who find digital devices challenging. So today we're going to cover some of these topics and give you some interesting and insightful conversations that hopefully will help answer some of the questions that you might have on your side. Next slide, please. So my name is Mark Rudden. I lead sales for BrowserStack here in Europe. Joining us today, we have Rob Savage, Technology Services Manager with Aviva. Rob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Mark. Yes, my name is Rob Savage. I look after our digital testing function here at Aviva, so responsible for all the pretty front-end stuff that our customers see, so both web apps as well as native mobile apps.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob. We also are joined by Rohit Nair, who's our accessibility specialist here at BrowserStack. Rohit, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Hey, sure, Mark. Hi, folks. My name is Rohit. I've been helping a lot of clients across Europe, the APAC region, UK, Ireland, helping them achieve their accessibility goals. Really looking forward to this session.
Thanks so much. So before we go any further, just a few housekeeping items. So we're going to keep today's session to a maximum of 60 minutes. This session is being recorded, so you can request a copy of this afterwards if you'd like to share it internally within your organizations or for people who couldn't make it. All of the participants on the webinar today are muted, but you can ask dedicated questions in the Q&A box, which you should see at the bottom of the Zoom interface. We'll have a dedicated 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. So please do, as we move through the session and as the discussion goes on, any questions you have, please post them into the Q&A area so that we can then filter through those at the end of the call and make sure we get to as many of them as possible. Great. Okay, let's just cover off the agenda for today. So first things first, we're going to just look at what is the regulation, the European Accessibility Act of 2025, and the importance of it. We're going to talk about the common accessibility challenges in banking and finance, in particular, strategies and best practices to protect your organization. We're then going to hear from Rob how Aviva and clients across BrowserStack are approaching digital accessibility, and then we'll give you guys a demo and show you what that actually looks like on real devices. Great. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Rohit. Rohit, please take it away.
Hey, thanks, Mark. So what's the European Accessibility Act? EAA 2025, a lot of folks keep speaking about this every time, we get on client calls. In fact, a lot of customers are speaking to us because of the EAA. So let's kind of figure why and how this act came into being. Well, it took effect in April 2019, and the directive basically states that every product that is serving the European member states needs to be accessible in nature. The web technologies, mobile app technologies, etc. What that means is you need to follow the WCAG 2.1 level AA guidelines. The EA Act has a deadline too that's attached to it, and that's the June 2025 deadline. Speaking a bit more about who is it applicable to, it's actually applicable to all organizations that do serve this European Union. If you want to get into the specifics of it, it does speak about the banking application. It does speak about interpersonal communication services. Even all the audiovisual content that you put out there needs to be accessible in nature. That includes your media services, video streaming services, etc. And what that means is that the scope and breadth of this act is quite wide. What that means is, let's say if you're even putting out PDFs that go out to your customers, let's say if it's invoices or if it's an account statement, so to speak, even those need to be accessible in nature. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. Of course, with companies that have less than 10 employees, or if they have a turnover below 2 million euros, they can be exempt from EAA. But in our conversations, we have noticed that everybody does take this a bit more seriously, not only due to the compliance aspect of it, but also because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to have, accessible web applications, mobile app applications, because that was the vision, right? When Tim Berners-Lee founded the internet, it's supposed to be for everyone, no matter what stage of life you're in, or what space you're coming from. Let's look at the timelines. How does the timeline look like? And from June 2019, when it was adopted by the EU, how has it progressed so far? Looking at June 2022, what we have noticed that the EU member states had to translate this particular EAA, European Accessibility Act, into their own national laws. And we are seeing actually a pretty good plethora of, a pretty good spectrum of adoption by a lot of countries. Like, for example, the nation of France has come up with RGAA. There's also specific laws that point towards EAA in some way or fashion. But because the base of it remains the WCAG guideline, and luckily we do have a guideline that's created by W3C organization, it becomes quite easy from a communication standpoint, because all of us can kind of speak about a specific guideline, and have that communication from a success criteria standpoint or success criteria violation from a guideline standpoint. We have also noticed that a lot of the folks have created some fines regarding this. I see a lot of clients actually ask me about what does a fine look like, or how does that impact us. We actually have noticed that the German nation and the Ireland country has actually put up fines regarding this. Like, for example, in Germany, there's a 100,000 euro fine if you're not accessible by June 2025. It's a lovely law that they have passed over there. Folks, you might have also seen a poll coming up regarding your accessibility readiness. It just helps us understand, where you're at right now in this journey. And maybe we can pick up a few aspects from this poll and start to speak about it while we are having that conversation. We're just going to give it a couple of seconds till it's done. Now, let's look at the next topic of our discussion, and that's to do with the common accessibility issues in the BFSI space. And this is where I think we can maybe speak about what are the top challenges that I've seen my customers face, and when they speak with me, what are the aspects that really is something from a challenge standpoint, is something that they're struggling with, or something that they're working towards solving. I can see a few of these aspects already on the screen. You're speaking about some unclear link purpose, poor color contrast. But I think a practitioner like Rob will be able to maybe give us a bit more insight into what are the stuff he's seeing in the trenches, and how does he look at it from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, so I think certainly what I've learned recently is that there's lots of different types of accessibility defects that come out, and they're not always clear. So some of the ones we see on here, keyboards, accessibility limitations, that's a fairly obvious one. You need to be able to navigate through the pages. But as our sites become more and more complex and more rich with videos, data, animations, etc., then obviously that becomes a lot more difficult. I think if I can share a sort of fairly recent example of something we had at Aviva, which kind of demonstrates sort of the depth of the issue. So we had a driving application on our mobile device, so it rates how you drive. So you get a little traffic light if you're a terrible driver. You get a red, so too much acceleration, sharp braking, etc. Somewhere in the middle is an amber, and obviously a good driver gets a green. I won't say which one I got on that. And when we obviously need alt text behind all your images, and when we went through it with the screen reader, I think for the red part of the traffic light, it read out something like red dot or kind of red circle, which, you know, it's there is an alternative text. It sort of makes sense, but actually if you can't see that traffic light, you can't see that red dot is in the context of a traffic light. So the fix for us was obviously to put a lot more explanation around that. So I think that's probably some insight that I can give in terms of the depth of the defects. You know, just having alt text, it was a good demonstration to me of where, you know, just kind of paying lip service to accessibility and adding your alt text and making sure you can navigate with your keyboard isn't quite enough. You actually really need to have some understanding and kind of sort of deeper thinking, if you like, about the type of users that are using your system. And it's not just blind users. You know, that's the obvious one. I think when we talked about accessibility, certainly historically a couple of years ago, people think, right, it just needs to work for a screen reader. And you know, when you're in the business of car insurance, some people might challenge that and say, well, blind people don't need to drive cars. But there's so many more disabilities out there which we need to cater for now. Not just physical as well. There's, you know, lots of neurodivergent disability that we need to cater for. I was on a call recently. There was a survey came up on the screen, and on that survey, people were like giving thumbs up, and it was firing in loads of like different coloured thumbs up. And a particular user on the call really struggled with that. So, like I said, there's a lot wider issues, and also people have temporary disabilities as well. You could break your arm playing sport, something which I'm familiar with recently. And you know, you can't use your mouse all of a sudden, so now you need to be able to use the keyboard. So it's not necessarily just about those screen readers. There's a lot more to think about.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for sharing that, Rob. I think two aspects really stood out there. One is that, you know, users can be in various states, right? I mean, it can be a temporary disablement, it can be a permanent disablement. And I think empathy really stands out there. I mean, you did speak about, you know, how it's important to think from the user's standpoint. And the second aspect that really stood out was the whole contextual understanding of what an issue is from an accessibility standpoint. People do try to, you know, kind of get it down to, let's say, one success criteria and how that affects, and whether it's a tick mark, whether we have passed, or whether we have failed. But I think that may be not certainly the right way to look at it, because then it's still a tick mark, like that you mentioned. But you know, I would love to understand how you look at, you know, empathy as a leader in your organization. And you know, when you're having these conversations about accessibility, are you approaching this from an empathy standpoint? And especially with such a big organization, right? As a leader, how do you look at this? You know.
So you get different viewpoints across the organization. There's some that will say we need to do this because it's the law. So, you know, obviously we need to follow the law, particularly in a regulated industry. Actually, there's some people that want to do this because it's just morally the right thing to do. We don't want to exclude users from our services. But then there's also a massive business benefit. So I've got the figure scribbled down next to me. I think it's so £270 billion in the UK is the kind of spending power of what we call the purple pound. So people with accessibility needs. So, you know, whichever one of the three reasons you're doing it for, they're all perfectly valid reasons for making sure that we comply. At the end of the day, there's, you know, businesses are out there to make some money. So why would we exclude users, you know, for just because they've got an accessibility need? And actually, you know, it's not. I would say it's not too difficult. You know, it's challenging to make your websites and your apps accessible, but it's not that difficult. You know, £270 billion is quite a big figure. Why wouldn't we want some of that?
That's absolutely, Rob, and that's just one nation, right? That's the UK Purple Pond survey, and we also have stats that says that you know, this particular you know, part of the population, the disabled folks, they do keep they're quite loyal in nature because they're able to interact with your platform quite easily. So they'll, you know, we tend to like keep buying from it again and again because it's easy to buy. It's, you know, easy to be brand loyal to particular brand. I think this is one big aspect that organizations with massive scale maybe don't connect too much, because I've I've noticed that there are some organizations that look at it from that standpoint, that hey, this is a big revenue opportunity for us too. But then there are some organizations that just want a compliance tick. So I think it becomes quite vital for folks on this call actually who are trying to speak to their leadership about why accessibility is important, that you do look at it from a revenue standpoint and what is the impact that it creates to your overall organization's KPI. Because then I think the conversation takes a different flavor, I would say. Apart from it being the right thing to do, and from a law standpoint, it's the aspect that you need to look at. But I think it empowers you to have more stronger conversations regarding it. Some other challenges that you can see on the screen actually does is something that really comes up. We have noticed that 15 success criterias lead to 94% of the most common issues for accessibility on digital technologies. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that if you cover the 15 success criteria, you're like really good to go. But that does give you some guidance on how you can strategize, how you can structure, and what you can aim for, so that you can create the biggest impact in your organization. Uh, Color contrast is actually a pretty big thing. Something that we have noticed is that there are 10% of men are colorblind in nature. It more so often happens that when we actually give demos, there are colleagues of mine who do end up saying that, hey, this is the color that I'm not able to view, and because they might have certain form of color issue that they might not be aware of. Something that you did mention is that, Rob, that there is some contextual understanding that is required when it comes to images and what that images mean for a particular space. Would love to understand more about, how did you encounter this for the first time, or, and how are you looking at it right now at Aviva?
Yeah, so I think for us, it's about having experts within the team that know this stuff. So the example I gave, if we were looking for alt text on that image, then we would have ticked that box. But what we need is people that know the disabilities and understand them, maybe even have disabilities themselves, coming and doing the testing for us. I think that's kind of the main thing I've learned over our kind of accessibility journey, is that you need people that do this day in, day out. It's quite a niche skill set.
Got it. Got it. I mean, that's something that you can't do without. I mean, especially for an organization of your scale and size. Yeah. I, I think I think this is the point where we can kind of look at how building you know, accessible content, accessible websites, and mobile apps look like. What would be the top key things that organizations can look at when they are looking at building an accessible website or mobile app, right? Uh, Quick question for you, Rob. Is it better to publish an accessibility statement and say that here where we are at right now, or do you think it's better to do some homework, get things right, get your house in order, and then maybe go out and say that this is where we are at?
Definitely the latter, particularly if you're a big organization. So, Aviva's obviously pretty large, and different pockets are better accessibility than others, and it takes a bit of time to kind of spread that message across all departments. Obviously, the digital and the front end is kind of where it starts, but there's lots more to it than that. We need to think about our internal applications as well. So yeah, in terms of publishing a statement, definitely kind of get your strategy in order, know what you're capable of doing, audit what you've got, know where you currently sit, and what the work is going to be required to fix that.
Absolutely. And when you speak about audits, like what's the recommended guideline here for an organization? Do you break up your audits as per products, or do you look at a complete audit for your web portfolio for a certain section? I mean, I know scale does lead to some problems in every aspect of whatever you do. But maybe if you can also look at it from a perspective of what's the most efficient thing to do, maybe for a big organization, and also for, let's say, a medium-sized to small organization.
Yeah, maybe this is perhaps a good point to talk through how we approached it at Aviva, and kind of how we set up the team. So I'll probably answer the question. So I think accessibility really got noisy for us a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, when actually all of a sudden there was a bit more senior focus that we needed to be doing this. And I think there'd been pockets of people on the ground that had been kind of championing it. but it wasn't necessarily sort of high on the agenda higher up. So yeah, it started to get a bit noisy. So we looked at what do we need to do to make this work? Like, you know, where are we at? What do we have to do? And the first question, predominantly from outside of IT, was, well, can we not just get our existing test team to do it? When they test all the other stuff, can they just do a bit of accessibility testing? And actually, it's not as simple as that. It's quite a niche skill, and just asking someone to bolt it onto their, you know, their usual sprint testing, their functional, their automation testing, is not realistic. And, you know, I go back to that example I gave of needing to have that kind of in-depth knowledge of the users. So we very quickly established that just sending people on a 1 or 2 day accessibility training course, or you know, attending a webinar isn't enough. You need experts. And I guess if I could give one takeaway that I've learned, is that you need to treat this a bit like security testing or pen testing, in that you know, for your pen testing, you wouldn't ask your testers in the teams to also do the security testing. You get in some experts to do that, whether that's you've got an internal team or you outsource that to a third party. And accessibility should be treated in the same way. So that's what we did. We built what we now call our accessibility testing center of excellence. So we have a team of experts in accessibility testing that kind of get dropped into projects or teams as and when required. Now, that's not to say that we don't expect our sort of regular testers in the teams to do accessibility testing, and obviously there's great tools that help them do, you know, really good level of coverage for that, which I'm sure you guys are going to demonstrate later. But what we tend to do is with that team is we either get them to do an audit of an app. So if we haven't looked at something properly with accessibility in mind before, we'll drop that team in and they'll do the audit, so we then know where we're at. But also if we're developing a new app, so shameless plug, we recently launched a new app called My Aviva. So if you've got an Aviva policy, then recommend you download it. So that was a whole new app, whole new technology. So we embedded the accessibility team into that delivery to make sure that we were doing it right from the start. Obviously, testing is just one part of that. At the same time, we had people championing it from a design point of view, because obviously if you're not designing with accessibility in mind, then you're literally kind of trying to hold back the flood. It's just going to keep coming. You've got to get to the design. Same as with any kind of quality issue. You know, you want to be designing with quality in mind, whether it's accessibility or functional, non-functional, etc. So I think there was a real push sort of across the whole wider organization to get this right. So, you know, right from design, development, business analysis and test. So that's kind of where we are today. So we have our center of excellence team, but we're also getting things embedded in our automation, because some of these checks, forgive the pun, but some of these checks are black and white. You know, color contrast is a good one. That it either passes or it fails. It meets requirements or it doesn't. But then equally, there are some tests that aren't black and white. So, you know, the one I mentioned earlier might have been a pass on paper, but actually, you know, could we have made it better? And we have seen examples as well as where some fixes made for one disability group can make it worse for another disability group. So,
Right.
On some areas there is grey areas, and I guess that's why they're called guidelines. You know, there's not it's not always guaranteed that it's a kind of straight pass or fail.
Right, Rob. That's so insightful. And I think you bring up a very important aspect about how it's important to look at this accessibility from all angles. You need your designers to look at it, you need your developers and your QA colleagues to look at it. And something that I keep hearing from my clients is that how do you get all these teams to contribute? You know, what would be the best approach here? Like, do we create an accessibility guild? I know you have a center of excellence, but then how do we get, like, you know, the designers to come have a seat at the table, the developers to have maybe the right linting process so that they can take away a lot of the load, and then the QAs, of course, are I would say, the heavy lifters in this space, right? I mean, typically when you look at the company, they do all this work. But yeah, what would be the ideal way to, you know, have all of them come together and collaborate better?
Yeah, so it takes time to build, but we have an accessibility champions group, and we have people within those functions that you mentioned, particularly in the design space, who have been recruited based on their approach to accessibility. So they are champions of it. And then that's kind of propagated out over time. So, we now have champions in all of the teams. So the testing center of excellence is just one small part of that. But it is difficult. You need people to be invested in it and kind of have a passion for it. And you probably need a few key individuals that really drive it for it to then start to gain some traction across the organization. Like I say, a year journey for us from people sort of talking about it in pockets to actually having a joined up view that senior leaders are invested in.
Got it. That's quite interesting to know. And one last thing I would like to ask you about is that we did. Of course, we have a lot of designers who always speak about accessibility, and it's like, I've met so many of them who come from such a great space of empathy and understanding from where the user group is at, and what really will stop them. But from a development standpoint, right? I mean, when developers are developing something, they already have like a huge list of issues from SonarQube or whatever they're using from a linting standpoint, right? Now you have your QA colleagues coming up with all these lists of accessibility issues now. So, the question does arise, when we speak to the developers across our client organizations, that how do we go about prioritizing what to solve first, and how does that impact our release cycles? What do we need to go ahead and solve for first, and also maybe if you can give some cue about how Aviva and you as an organization kind of are looking at how the QA can have a stronger say and also get their accessibility issues looked at, resolved at. So maybe if you can speak around these two themes, that will be lovely to hear.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of the priority, so for us, anything that's raised gets categorized like any other defect. So, if we're breaking a law, it's probably going to be a critical defect. If we're excluding a particular user group, then that's going to be up there as well. So we don't treat accessibility defects particularly differently. Which is probably the right thing. They go into the pot of any other defects that we find and are prioritized accordingly. And obviously, if we're breaking a law or excluding some user groups, you would expect that to be something that has to be fixed before that particular feature goes live. And I think in terms of getting that prioritization right, that's about all the disciplines we mentioned earlier. So your business people, your designers, your developers, etc. Having knowledge and understanding of what accessibility is and why it's important. So actually, I think for us that part's fairly easy. We don't discriminate on our defects, I guess is the answer. A defect gets treated like any other.
That's great to hear. Ben, of course, I got to ask, has BrowserStack been able to help you? Has our solution been able to, help you and your colleagues in your day-to-day process? And hopefully we did create some impact, on your...
Definitely. So we're big fans of BrowserStack. Use a lot of the products, and although I said earlier, you want to get people in that are experts. Even experts can use tools to help speed up what they do. We have automation experts, but they're not writing in binary code. They're using tools and features that speed up that process. So absolutely, I mentioned before, there's some tests which can be automated, which can be closed off, and we use the SDK in some of our teams where they can just run their automation and do a feature flag to say and test for accessibility and get the results out of that. And then that center of excellence uses BrowserStack heavily. We've got them spread across the world. So some of them are using devices remotely, and some of them are using physical devices in their hands. So yeah, absolutely, we're using the BrowserStack tools to help speed things up.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Rob. What we would like to do is maybe give the audiences here a view of what our accessibility product suite looks like. I know we have a pretty robust test-off platform that we are building, and a lot of our customers, a lot of our colleagues that that we speak to globally have a great view of what all we do overall. But now there's this one box in that test ops chain that's called accessibility, and when you kind of zoom into it, this is how that looks like. So for all the folks on the call, this is our accessibility product suite. We are really trying to solve this problem from multiple angles now. So right from the design side, you can see that at the most left-hand side of the box, like the design team that's actually building this tool, He did mention that it's called shifting lefter, because now we are trying to, looking at it even before the development phase. And that's what the design tool will help you do. We have a Figma plugin that's upcoming. It's going to go alpha access in December. If you are really keen on being part of the alpha program, happy to, hear that from you, maybe in the chat window or the Q&A window here. We'd be happy to include you in that. On the web testing side of things, we have the scanning and monitoring solution. Let's say if you're new to the whole accessibility accessibility space in general, all you need to do is take your URLs, load it on our system, and every day you get accessibility issues across all these URLs, delivered to you in your inbox and also on our central reporting dashboard. We also have a lovely Chrome extension for manual testing that will keep running every time there's a DOM change on your page. So you traverse multiple URLs and you'll have a single report that gives you an access to all these accessibility issues. Something that really can scale up for all our customers on this call who are using BrowserStack for their test automation, who are using our SDK already plugged in. All you have to do is just add one line of code. The first time I heard that, I thought it sounds too good to be true. But when I saw it in action, that's all you got to do. Just add one line of code to your existing test automation suite that's running on BrowserStack, and all of them can start testing for accessibility. Mobile app accessibility testing is something that a lot of the customers do speak about, and they do check. What are you folks doing at it? How are you folks different? What's happening there? We are glad to convey that we have already launched a mobile app accessibility testing toolkit, and we are also coming up with test automation next month. That's again in alpha. Happy to hear your thoughts on who would want to be included here, and if you folks would like to come in and give us some understanding of what you folks are doing. We also have the PDF testing toolkit that's going to go live. I saw a question recently. I saw a question in the Q&A section about about like how do we test for PDFs? How can we do that? Happy to convey there are tools in the market that help you do that. Several of them. But in case you want to give BrowserStack a try, happy to host that conversation with you too. This I think brings up to a quick poll. We would love to understand what kind of tools or solutions does you and your team use. If you would like to vote, it's on your screen. Would love to just understand, your understanding of how you folks are looking at this. All right.
So Rohit, just a quick note on the Q&A. We're not there yet. We'll look at the demo first, but just keep posting your questions in the Q&A box. We'll answer whatever is a quick answer. We'll answer in the Q&A box itself. Anything that's more of a discussion point, we will answer it after the demo.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. What we would like to also do is provide you, a quick view of how we are approaching this problem and why we as a company did decide that, let's go ahead and build accessibility testing over the last couple of years, and because how can we help our customers? I think the biggest problem that we did come across is that the whole setup for starting accessibility testing, the opportunity cost was pretty high. It's a quite tedious process to get that going. Rob, maybe you want to share your early days with getting started with accessibility. Was that tedious for you, or how was your and the organization's experience with that?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it, to find the right tools, and I think accessibility testing has matured quite quickly. And in the early days, I think I saw a question in the chat around what tools are we using. So yeah, we tried Axe, and then we tried sort of embedding Axe in the automation, and obviously now we're more reliant on BrowserStack. So I think those tools have developed kind of as our understanding of accessibility has developed as well. So I think the landscape is very different to how it used to be, but certainly I can resonate with seeing needing to juggle multiple tools down there. Is like, okay, do we need to bring in something else? And certainly a big organization like ours, any new tooling, there's some red tape to jump through. it's and rightly so. We can't just be bringing in tools into an organization that has quite sensitive customer data. So where we can avoid it, we don't want to add new tools unless they add really good value. So we mentioned the SDK. Adding one line of code to our existing BrowserStack tests means I don't have to go through all the forms filling in to bring in new tools, because we've already got that relationship. So, but yeah, certainly stuff has matured quite a bit since we first started looking at this.
Absolutely, Rob. And I think in our previous conversation also we did speak about the opportunity cost and the change management, so to speak, right, for organizations like yourselves. It's just huge, right? I mean, it's also about like getting something in and also evaluating it and also seeing to it whether everything works. Maybe Rob, you can maybe spend a couple of seconds on how you approach this problem from a change management standpoint, right? From the implementation of accessibility and also from a tooling standpoint.
Yeah, well, so from the tooling, like you said, getting stuff in and even doing a proof of concept, we still have to do all the due diligence on those tools and those checks, because we don't want to expose our organization to anything bad. So where we've got an existing provider like BrowserStack, that's obviously a lot easier. Yeah, and identifying the right tools is also hard, particularly in a landscape that's moving quite quickly. How do you know who the experts are? So that I guess is where having a partner in you guys that we trust is really useful.
Absolutely appreciate that, Rob. What we would like to also maybe give the audience over here a quick sneak peek into our mobile app accessibility, solution. Maybe we can move to the next slide and give you a quick view of, how we're building that. I think one of the reasons that we wanted to kind of show that is because we're seeing a lot of questions around mobile app, even in the chat window over here. So what we can do is, I know maybe a bit out of the script here, but maybe we can give a quick view of how we do mobile app accessibility from a product standpoint, and I mean a view of the product, a quick peek into it, right? Three things that really stand out is that there's zero setup required. All you require is one URL, and you can load your real device from our infra, start testing on it. You get access to an advanced rule engine. We are creating our own proprietary rule engine, and you can also do some enhanced debugging. It's a pretty cool tool. We already have clients who are looking at our complete portfolio, but yeah, mobile app accessibility is also the leading in that particular space. What I'll do is I'll quickly share my screen, and I'll give you a quick view of how the toolkit looks like, and it'll be a quick short demo, so to speak, not too much into it. So here's the URL that I spoke about. You can just go there and you can see all these real devices that are loading up on my screen as we speak, right? And you have iPads, you have iPhones, everything right available in just a click. And I'm just opening up a Samsung Galaxy S22, the nearest data center that I'm based out of. And it's actually loading a real Samsung Galaxy S22 as we speak. You can see it's quite seamless. I can load an app from the Play Store, from my tray, or upload via locally or via a URL. Let me load a Wikipedia sample app. So this is actually loading a Wikipedia sample application on a Samsung Galaxy S22 real device. Right, the real device goes to the left on the screen, and you can see the app has loaded. I'm interacting with it just like any other device. I can change location connected to my pre-prod environment, and I can choose a specific guideline that I want to test against. And just by clicking on Start Scan, what it's doing is it's taking the viewport into consideration, and it's going to list down all the accessibility issues related to that viewport towards my right. I'm glad to convey that we are covering 80% of the most common repeated accessibility issues for mobile apps. So it does reduce a lot of your manual effort substantially. And of course, time saved is money saved. And while I'm hovering over these icons, you can see it's being highlighted on the screen. And I can read more about these issues from a issue standpoint, from a WCAG violation standpoint. I can look at it from a code standpoint and what is it that we are missing. And I can also read more about this. So here's a complete view of what resize text means, and also some references to WCAG itself. Now, all of this is quickly available in our dashboard. So you can save a report, and you can access all these reports in the manual testing dashboard that we have. And you can share any of these reports to any of your colleagues. We have an absolutely easy share option that allows you to share this as a private link, as a public link. Everything is quite possible right there. You can also filter reports as per device name, username, app package, and OS versions. And that's a quick view of how you can do mobile app accessibility with us. We also provide you screen readers, so TalkBack on Android and iOS VoiceOver on iOS. So you don't need to also buy a lot of devices, because now you can test with a real screen reader on our platform. Just sort of maybe showing you a quick view of how that looks like from a screen reader standpoint. We also understand that there are a lot of accessibility gestures that folks do when they do accessibility testing. We actually have a lot of keyboard shortcuts available for screen reader.
TalkBack on. New gestures in TalkBack. Tap to learn how to use TalkBack faster with new gestures. Wikipedia. Search Wikipedia. Search Wikipedia in list.
Right, that's a quick view of how you can also do screen reader testing. You can change location, record a session, capture bugs, do pre-prod connected to your pre-prod environment. Everything's right here. All right. I shall stop my demo now, because I can keep speaking about this lovely product, but we would love to open this up for Q&A. We have a lot of questions, and for that, I'll hand it over back to you, Mark.
Great. Thanks so much, folks. I think a lot of the focus over the last couple of years has been on web and browser accessibility. So we're very, very excited to move into mobile app accessibility and especially automation around that. I think it's a real game changer. In terms of Q&A, let me kind of filter through some of these. Some of these are answered. Please use the Q&A box if there's anything you'd like Rohit or Rob to answer. So what automated tools, libraries are you using, Axe, accessibility, and so on, from Augustine? I can go ahead and answer that. Rob, in your particular case, you were using free tools, open source tools like Axe Core in the past, and then you've built upon that with BrowserStack.
Yeah, that's right. We were using the plugins and things for Axe on Chrome browser, and then I think we shoehorned it into our automation. And yeah, now using BrowserStack, which is a bit more slick.
Great. There's a couple of different questions on resources for accessibility testing. Rohit, I'll start with you on this one. How do we train all teams on accessibility? What are some resources you can suggest for small teams that cannot afford an accessibility expert? I found there's not much training resources for actual testing for QAs. What are your recommendations there? Rob, as a test team manager myself, this is from Simon. I'd be interested to hear which element of training worked for your usual testers outside of the Center of Excellence. How did you ensure they felt confident working with tools like screen readers?
Yeah, so I guess this is something that's just kind of grown over time for us. So I think you need to identify people in your team that have an interest in this and that can use that term, be a champion for it. in terms of the tooling, I think it's got to work and it's got to work well. So, I mentioned we shoehorned Axe into our automation suite a while ago, and it kind of was a bit of it literally was shoehorned in. So, if the tools don't work and they're not easy to use, then people aren't going to use them, and that's obviously where the BrowserStack offering does a pretty good job, and it's nice and slick. And then in terms of training, there's a couple of questions actually around training, isn't there? So yeah, there is quite a bit out there. So I'm not sure where the people on the call are from, but there's an organisation, if I can get this right, I think it's the British National Institute for the Blind. They do lots of free stuff on their site. Obviously, you can pay companies that can come in and do some of the auditing for you and do some training, but there is plenty out there if you look for it. And obviously, the guidelines themselves are a form of training. What we've done internally is to take each of those guidelines and then break that down to actually what does that mean for Aviva? What does guideline 1.2.1, what do we need to do to achieve compliance for that? And then that helps break it down for the users that perhaps aren't familiar with accessibility.
Yeah, and just to maybe add on to that, I've seen that the accessibility community has put out so many amazing resources out there. I mean, there's this one course on edX that's actually supported by the W3C organization that gives you a complete breakdown of accessibility from the start. Why is it important? How do you go after, how do you go about it? In fact, there's one module in the course which I found very interesting, which I think all of you should give a try, is they tell you to close your eyes and then put on the screen reader and actually navigate the whole session, or navigate your technology, just to try to make sense of, how a person will perceive your technology, and how does it make sense. So I think it's a good idea for you folks to also look at this problem from a user standpoint, from the end user standpoint, and there are a lot of resources out there that can help you. What we can try and do is maybe share some free resources that are open. Also wanted to maybe convey that we are also trying to build a good documentation for every accessibility issue. So whenever you find the how to fix in BrowserStack, we actually link it back to a brief document about how can you go about fixing this issue and how that impacts a disabled user. So I think even we are trying to do a bit there, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. Next question here from Stefanos regarding contrast problems. Should one, I'm assuming that says contrast problems, should one sacrifice the aesthetic and design in a way to ensure accessibility? Because in this sense, a lot of things will start looking very similar. More of a design UI UX kind of conversation.
I think there's a balance, isn't there? You want your site to work for everyone, and you want to be compliant. I think it's possible to have good looking websites and apps and be compliant.
Yeah. It's finding that balance. Again, but that's a challenge to the designers and the product guys to work within those parameters, in the same way as car designers have to work within the health and safety. The crash regulation stuff has changed how cars look as well. Estella, I hear a lot that fixing accessibility issues that keep being flagged in automated tools only solves 15% of the accessibility issues. A lot of this needs to be checked by manual testing. Do you have a plan in place to do user testing with people with disabilities? If so, how do you organize it?
I could probably take some of that question. I hear so many different figures around automation covers 70%, or automation only covers 30%, or it's 50, or it's 45. I'll be truthful honest, I don't really know what the actual figure is of what automation can cover. And again, going back to that example I gave earlier, your automation might say, yes, there's some alt text in place. What it can't do is check that that's kind of contextual and makes sense. So it's probably quite hard to come up with a figure. In terms of testing with people with disabilities, we do that. I'm not particularly involved in that. We do that generally at the design phase, as opposed to the kind of final testing phases. Maybe that's something that we could be a bit better at. What we do often do, though, is similar to what Rohit just mentioned. If we have like a bug hunt or a group testing session, someone will say, right, I'm not going to use my mouse, or I'm going to close my eyes and just use the screen reader. Yeah, that's probably as much as I can give on that one.
No
Yeah.
worries. There's a couple of questions coming in around kind of can I implement accessibility in a WordPress website? Can we use how do you test a website for color blindness, all that kind of stuff? We can obviously Rohit and the accessibility team can follow up with anybody and do more bespoke short demos that answer your specific questions or your specific use cases. But in the interest of kind of covering some of the more discussion questions, we'll finish with a couple of those. So we have a question here around will automated tools ever replace human testers, do you think? That's a large, wide-ranging question.
I hope not. I hope not.
I hope not. No,
Sure
it's
is.
certainly not. It's certainly not our strategy at BrowserStack. We actually have an upcoming webinar in about a week or two on AI, that will cover a lot of this. We're running events across Europe next week as well, which cover a lot of this. So, but in short, at BrowserStack, we think it's about augmenting and simplifying and speeding up, using AI to pull together our products in a more efficient manner and give people more control, flexibility, and speed. So it's more about filling in the gaps and moving quicker. But please do register for our next webinar to get into that topic in a much more meaningful way. What is the best practice for accessibility automation? Should it focus on the component level or the full page level? Which approach would be preferable?
Oh, that's a good one. Maybe I can take a stab at that. So I've actually had, I'm speaking from my clients' experiences. We were speaking to one of the largest retailers in Europe, and one of our clients, and they went completely shift left for accessibility. They went very heavy on the linting aspect. They did everything right with the components. And guess what? They're still finding accessibility issues when the site goes live. Now, the reason behind that is even if you create accessible components, the moment they come together and all these dynamic components load on a web page, the accessibility criteria of that page changes or the mobile app changes. So ideally, you want to do things at the component level too, but at the same time, you want your QA colleagues or your colleagues who are actually, or your end user that is actually experiencing your platform, you should experience your platform from an end user standpoint too. So that way you get the breadth and scope of it. But of course, if you start at component level, at least your workload on the QA side of things will be lower. And that saves actually a lot of time and cost for an organization if you're able to execute that right away. But there's no one-stop solution. There's no silver bullet that you got to do component only. But the idea is to do component, the development piece also right, and also the QA piece right. That's when you kind of look at it, and of course the design side also. So yeah, that's the ideal way to look at it.
I'm conscious of time. We are at time. So we have a number of unanswered questions. We're going to follow up with those post the webinar. So Rohit and team will be in touch to for more of the technical and more specific things versus some of the more strategic and direction related questions. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I want to thank Rohit and Rob for all of your insights, your answers, and your time this morning. Thank you so much. Anybody who wants to follow up with us in a more particular manner, Rohit and his team are available to do that. Thank you very much, and see you all next time. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you, team. Thank you, folks.
Thanks.